Hey, what is up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Fantasy First here on the High Stakes Sports Debates Network. And I am joined by an esteemed colleague of mine and a good friend, Buffalo's own 91.3 FM WBNY's general manager, Nicholas Lippa. Nick, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing great, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Anytime we're talking fantasy sports, you know that gets me aroused. Ha ha ha. So we're going to jump right in. Today we are talking sleepers, busts, and cuffs. Because, really nailing down this particular niche in fantasy could help you win your league, a la 2013 Josh Gordon, Zach Stacy, guys like these that bust out, break out, even if it's just 1 year, that could potentially help you win a fantasy championship. And we're also going to examine some sleepers, some busts, guys you don't want to overvalue that could potentially tank your year, as well as guys that could be very useful if an injury were to occur to a particular starter. So we're going to roll right in here to some of our sleepers. Nick, I'm going to let you kick it off. Who do you think could be a really good, valuable sleeper in the top 60 that could way overproduce their current value?
Yeah, a guy who's going to overproduce is Todd Gurley if he's healthy. Todd Gurley is an absolute monster athletically. You're talking Adrian Peterson potential for his career. And if I say Adrian Peterson potential for his career, you got to think right now, even as a rookie, he's going to be able to produce. I'm thinking right now with Nick Foles as his quarterback and less receiving options, he's a guy who's low thousands for yardage, but high touchdown productions, similar to what Trent Richardson did in Cleveland, except we all know that Todd Gurley is a much more talented back than Trent Richardson. This all comes down to health. But if you're drafting the third week of August for your fantasy draft or the first week of September before the season starts, and Todd Gurley is healthy, he's a guy I would say you're not overdrafting for in the mid-second round, early second round, because realistically, he'll be a first-round pick next year if he's healthy going into the year. St. Louis had him number one on their draft board coming into this year. There's no way that he's not going to be getting lots and lots of touches every game if he's healthy.
Okay, definitely. Wow, Gurley. I love Gurley. We all know about his talent. Let me ask you a quick question, though, Nick. If you had to take one of those elite safer receivers, and the debate was between a Calvin Johnson, a Julio Jones, or a Todd Gurley, where would you go in that situation?
I go with the receivers in that situation. However, a lot of those receivers go early second round, and because of that, I will take a guy like Gurley over. And Gurley, personally, is my 12th running back on the list. I like him even better than Mark Ingram.
Yeah, I have him at 15, so I'm in that realm with you. But go ahead.
It's one of those. He's one of those guys where if your draft is going receiver heavy, don't be afraid to take him or take a chance on him. I'll lean towards a guy like McCoy and Murray, but come draft day, if Gurley's healthy, I may have him ranked over Hill a couple of weeks from now. And I know that's a big, bold statement, but Gurley is the real deal. And I'm not the biggest fan of Jeremy Hill's schedule in Cincinnati this year, especially because he's going to have those weeks where Giovanni Bernard is healthy and there's going to be touches away from that. While I think Trey Mason is less of a threat to Todd Gurley in that aspect, I think Gurley is going to be a top 12 pick next year if he's healthy this year.
Oh, very interesting. I like it. It's bold. Could help you win your fantasy leagues, though, because we all know how void the running back position is in fantasy football. Everybody's experienced it. At one point last year, my RB1 was Fred Jackson. So I totally know that feeling. And Todd Gurley definitely has the talent. It won't be Sean Hill back there. And we all know Nick Foles isn't a world beater. But in my personal opinion, he is definitely an upgrade from whatever backup quarterback they had and potentially even a semi-healthy Sam Bradford.
The fact of the matter is you can get Todd Gurley in the third round, and some drafts even the fourth.
That's fantastic value, too.
And that's just amazing value for the production you could potentially get. Do you agree with me, Tom, that Todd Gurley, if healthy, has the potential to be a top 10 fantasy running back?
I think if healthy, starting week 1, Todd Gurley could be a top 8 fantasy back.
So there you go. If you're getting that in the third or fourth round, that's great value. And if we're talking about value, that's where you go.
Let me ask you a question. C.J. Anderson or Todd Gurley right now?
I go Anderson, but Anderson's actually number 5 on my running back list.
I agree. I have him at 4. So I'm going to jump into one of my top 60 sleepers right now, and I want to get your opinion about this, Nick. Also, you can follow him at Nicholas Lip on Twitter. He's got great insight for you. I love Andre Johnson. I'm truly enamored. I don't care about the age. 33, 34 is fine. We saw basically a fossil Reggie Wayne pretty much get, I believe, 116 targets. And that was in 15 games started, but we know he was in and out of the lineup due to some nagging injuries throughout the year. I'm totally in love with Andre. T.Y. Hilton will be able to reserve to go back to his field stretching role, and I think Andre Johnson could put up some serious numbers. If anybody predicts Luck to have over 40 touchdowns this year, this isn't going to be Gary Kubiak 3 touchdowns for Andre Johnson, okay? You finally got an adequate quarterback who could put balls on phase accurately in the corners of the end zone. We saw that sick catch that Andre Johnson had at the 2013 season, some sick end zone grab against Tennessee. It was absolutely ridiculous. I've got better quarterback play. I'm not saying 10 touchdowns, but I like somewhere in the area of 7 to 9, a 1,200-yard season. I think he could be a low-end wide receiver 1 in PPR formats, and if I'm getting that at 4th-round value, any of those pieces of that Aaron Rodgers or that Andrew Luck offense, I will eat up all day. What do you think about that, Nick?
I love Andre Johnson because he's going 4th, 5th round right now. A lot of cases he's going 5th round, early 5th round, and that's just steal. That's just a plain steal. The matter of the fact is, look at Andre Johnson like you looked at Reggie Wayne when he was 32 years old, around that age. Look at him like that. Reggie Wayne was a 1,000-plus yard receiver and a very good fantasy contributor right before Peyton Manning's injury, his neck injury. Yeah. That's exactly how you look at Andre Johnson.
Look at his rookie year with Luck. I think he had over 1,300 yards.
So you're looking at it right now. Andre is tremendous value. He's a guy who probably will be top 30 come next year. He's going to go at least, I think, 20 picks higher as long as he's healthy. He's still a physical freak. He's still a guy who's going to create mismatches. And with T.Y. Hilton being a threat for safeties, it's going to allow for a lot of between the line of scrimmage and 20 yards, a lot of action for Andre to get a lot of catches. If you're in PPR, Andre is a great pick because I think he's going to have a lot of catches this year because of the threat of T.Y. Hilton and Philip Dorsett, their new rookie receiver. Andre's a monster, and he is tremendous value. I would take Andre Johnson over a guy like – I would even actually take him over DeAndre Hopkins, mainly because
I would too.
I like Andre's quarterback situation. Think of it this way. This is the end-all for it. Is Andrew Luck going to throw more than 4,000 yards this year?
Most
yes.
Definitely.
Is Andrew Luck going to throw more than 30 touchdowns this year?
Most definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's got to go somewhere. And between Dwayne Allen, Kobe Fleener, T.Y. Hilton, Andre Johnson, yes, there's a lot of mouths to feed. Andre Johnson, I will. This is a Lippa guarantee.
The Lippa guarantee, folks.
Plus 1,100 yards receiving, at least plus 1,100 receiving, and at least 7 touchdowns this year. That's definitely warrant for that because there's upside to those numbers. Those are
floor. Yeah, exactly. That's your floor. And and one other thing I wanted to bring up. I'm not predicting 22 touchdowns here, but we saw an aging Randy Moss leave an Oakland situation, and the next year he got a quarterback, and it was just rocket ship to space in terms of the numbers. I'm not predicting 22. I'm just saying, you see, a guy like that gets a quarterback, puts more life into him. Listen, Andre Johnson had 85 catches in a year where he basically didn't try. He's just like, yeah, I'm here under contract, so I have to play. You think he balled out last year for Matt Schaub or I forgot who was quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think.
Ryan Mallett.
Bill O'Brien probably suited up a game. So, yeah, I like Andre Johnson there, and I think those are 2 studs potentially in Gurley and Johnson. Now, let me get to one of your guys, Nick, that's a little bit overvalued right now in terms of a high average draft position in the top 60 who you think could flat out bust.
So, Tom, you're going to hate me for this because I know you like him a lot, but I hate running backs who are over the age of 30 who have a lot of miles on them, and I just can't buy into Frank Gore.
You can't buy into Frank Gore. I'm all in on Frank Gore.
I can't personally because I look at this guy. He's got so many miles on him. You've been talking the past 2 years really where you're going, when's it going to happen? And he's just kind of defied odds. Playing in a very run-friendly system, however, with Greg Roman and San Francisco's previously really great offensive line. They're disbanded. But I really, really like Boom Herring because of that. I think, and we'll get to that when we get to Cuffs, he's going to be one of my must guys, and I'll mention that again. But Frank Gore, he's a guy who could completely bust out. This is the one point I'm going to bring up to mainly drill it through. Great quarterback, Andrew Luck, yeah. Star receivers, yeah. Still doesn't work out? Steven Jackson can tell you about that. That's exactly the same kind of draft position that killed teams, that third, fourth round Steven Jackson pick 2 years ago, where he just panned out. I mean, I think at best you're looking for Gore's like a 3.8 yards per carry, 3.5. That's at best if he stays healthy and then racks up some touchdowns here or there. But I don't think that he's going to be on passing downs too much. I think Boom Herring's really going to fill out that role, and that's going to bring down his value as well. So I think Frank Gore is a guy I would stay clear from. His age, he's just not worth it, especially when there's guys like Andre Johnson I would rather have at that spot, or guys that are like Melvin Ingram, who potentially there, or even Mark Ingram has been falling down where Frank Gore has been taken at times. Those guys are just better value at that. A guy like Sammy Watkins, who's been going around later, is just a better upside pick for your team, especially if you're in PPR, in my opinion. But again, that also depends on what you do. But I think Frank Gore is bust.
Interesting, because I'm on the complete other opposite side of the fence here. I think Gore has got the potential to be an RB2 with upside, especially when you consider the fact that pre-Greg Roman, this guy was a 60 reception guarantee. And we saw exactly like you said, Boom Herring, Ahmad Bradshaw was a weekly top 13 PPR play because of how much catching upside he had with Andrew Luck. I like the outside receptions and receivers, and you know that again that's where the bulk of Andrew Luck's targets are going to be coming to. I just feel like there might be a lot of open running space for Gore. He's not going to be relied on to be that grind out presence that he was in San Francisco to help your quarterbacks, the Alex Smiths, the Colin Kaepernicks. I don't know. You're worried about the age, definitely. Guys like Marshall Faulk, Tiki Barber had wonderful seasons at age 31, 32. Some guys are just built a little differently. I could understand why in the third round you'd be cautionate. But for me, I'm in the third round. I'm optimistic, though. So we see differently there. But I totally see your point, Nick. If you're looking for a little bit more safety, a little bit more youth and upside, maybe a Mark Ingram, maybe a Melvin Gordon might be your pick in round 3.
Let me ask you a question, Tom. Do you think that Frank Gore will get 1,000 yards this season?
Yes, I do.
Well, let me just throw this one out there. While he very well could, and he's been a great running back across his career, especially since he hasn't missed a game since 2011, which would be to counter my point. That being said, he's 32 years old, and since 2001, Emmitt Smith and Ricky Williams are the only running backs that are that old to reach 1,000 yards in a rushing season.
Mm-hmm. Interesting point. Again, those guys were guys, though, and I think, is Frank Gore a Hall of Famer to you? I think he's on the cusp of Hall of Fame status.
Yeah, I think that he has the potential to be that kind of guy, especially if he is in Indy this year and they make a series push and he's a big part of that. I think that's going to be a factor that goes into that. But if you talk about one of the best running backs of the past 5 to 10 years, Frank Gore is on that list. It's just he's not the sexiest pick. It's just, again, I don't trust 32-year-old backs, and taking a guy that early in the third round from where he's been going, that's really hard for me to do. It's just he's going up against a lot of odds. And he's a good blocker on third downs too, but I think the Colts are going to try to keep him healthy, which is going to hurt his fantasy value even if he does stay healthy, because he's going to be off in PPR situations instead of having a 60-catch season. I think it'll be close to what Ingram had in New Orleans when he wasn't on the field in third round, which is like 27 catches, 28, which again, maybe he'd have to stay healthy with those catches to warrant for me that third round value with some of the other receivers that are there.
Interesting perspective, Nick. Definitely. I love him. You hate him. Viewers, your choice whether you want to steer clear. We're going to move on to the next bust. For me personally, I've debated a couple guys. It is a running back. Some guys on my list that I had as potential buffs: Jamal Charles, Odell Beckham Jr., Arian Foster, Jordan Matthews, Matt Forte. The guy I'm going to pick here, though, is Arian Foster, strictly because right now he's a high second-round value pick. Okay, am I going to go with something safe there, like an elite wide receiver, a Julio Jones, a Calvin Johnson, a Jordy Nelson with Aaron Rodgers? Or do I take a guy who's basically had soft tissue issues his whole entire career? Gary Kubiak pounded him into the ground. Okay, he's probably already laying in his coffin down there. He's been pounded that high, okay? I'm just not sure if I'm willing to use a high second-round pick on an injury risk as Foster. And on the other side of the coin, I don't mention Odell Beckham as a bust, but in the first round, I'll take somebody a little bit safer right now. He's dealing with hamstring injuries right now. He's out of camp. In terms of the first round, I'll take a potential chance on a safe stud like Demaryius Thomas, somebody like that who I know has produced before and will continue to produce barring injury. What do you think about that, Nick?
So I totally agree. Actually, there's only 2 receivers I would consider taking in the first round. I was just saying, obviously, Antonio Brown. The other one's Julio Jones. Nobody else I really want to take in the first round over any of those other guys because, again, there's so many running backs this year that are just more worth your attention. A guy like C.J. Anderson, LaShawn McCoy, DeMarco Murray, these are all guys. And then again, I mean, Matt Forte, those are all guys I feel better with. And personally, in my top 12, Gronk has to be there because of his tight end.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when I look at that, there's really only 2 guys for me that I consider in the first round, and that's Julio Jones and Antonio Brown. A guy like Odell Beckham could be huge. He could be absolutely great. I love Odell Beckham's talent and what he could bring, but I'll take him mid-second round before I take him in the first round. That's where I really have Odell right now.
And I totally agree.
As far as your point with Arian Foster, I'm with you on that. If you talk about Foster, Foster has missed 11 games since 2013. He's been knocked out of a few others. Anybody who had him on their team, I think it was 2 years ago, it was either 2 or 3 years ago at his game against Minnesota. Christian Ponder came in. Foster went out of the game in the first quarter with a heart problem. It's just, it seems something always comes up to knock this guy out of a game. That was a playoff week. And
that's tough. And that's the question is he going to last an entire fantasy football season for you? I'm not sure. It's too risky. All right, now we are going to start talking about some handcuffs that could help you get to where you want to be in fantasy football, which is a champion, obviously. Nick, why don't you kick us off here? Who is one of the coveted handcuffs that you'll be targeting at the later end of your draft?
Well, you mentioned it before with the injury history Arian Foster has, missing the games he's had. You got to look at Alfred Blue. He was a handcuff at the end of last year, and he's going to pan out really well. He runs in a weak division. Jacksonville's defense is going to be better, but Tennessee's still hot garbage, as well as the fact that the Colts don't have the best defense really at all. This team gets a lot of hype, but really on the defensive side, you look at that first-round pick, it didn't go on defense.
Yeah, blunt force trauma, right?
Yeah. So you're looking at it right now. I like Alfred Blue a lot as a handcuff. If you draft Arian Foster, he's really good. He's a really great second or third to last round guy to pick up because a lot of people are just passing over him. They're not even looking at him. The obvious top handcuff that everybody's going for, and they should be, is Niall Davis.
Because he's an RB1 when Jamal Charles is out of the game.
So I like Niall Davis quite a bit. The biggest thing you have to think about is when you're picking handcuffs, my thing I like to think about is, you know who usually tends to put out good fantasy numbers? Guys who are on teams that win. So think about that when you're putting on a handcuff.
Very good point.
You may not think about it right now, but if Eddie Lacy goes down, you feel pretty good having James Starks with Aaron Rodgers there. It's very coveted. If you're looking at a situation where who's the backup that's going to be in Indianapolis if they're going to be winning games, it's going to be Boom Herron. And that's why Boom Herron's probably a top 3 guy for me, because if Gore goes down with an injury and
look out,
15
touches a game, easy. PPR stud.
You're talking top 10 PPR back in Boom Herron.
Yeah.
That's bold, but when Andrew Luck's your quarterback and you are especially good at catching the ball, pick handcuffs on teams you think are going to win, because a handcuff is just a shot in the dark anyways. Why don't you take a shot in the dark of somebody that you know their team's going to produce
good offense,
help you out?
Yeah, absolutely. When I got to consider keeping Boom Herron now in our PPR dynasty because of that, man. You know my running back situation in that league. So
when you're rolling with Fred Jackson week 1 last year as your number 1.
Absolutely.
Fred X, man, that 10-catch game last year?
9-catch, 93 yards against Oakland. Yeah, man, It saved me. Saved me. But, yeah, those are all wonderful handcuff options, Nick, and could potentially provide high-end, even RB1 value potentially. I think Starks has that RB1 potential without a guy like Lacy. I hate to stay in that offense, but that's kind of the theme here, is picking guys out of good offenses. I love Devontae Adams. When I look at this kid, when I watch the divisional round tape against the Dallas Cowboys, I see potential stud in his future with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, Mike McCarthy as your coordinator. You love that division. You got to put up points. I love playing the AFC West this year. Denver, San Diego, Kansas City, Oakland. I love that schedule. I love the kind of opportunities that this kid is going to get. Now, I don't know. You could probably enlighten me. I don't know if it was Richard Rodgers or one of those tight ends felt that it was necessary to shoot a gun off in the air, or something happened where a guy shot a gun. So is the tight end production going to be there, or does Green Bay go to a more of a 3-wide receiver set? So the potential is there, but even if I'm just looking at it as a handcuff, we lost 13 games, I think, from Randall Cobb in 2013. Jordy Nelson has had years where he's been nicked up. So when this kid is inserted into the lineup, he has the potential to be a wide receiver 1.
The fact of the matter is, there's nobody athletic on Green Bay's tight end spectrum, really. Yeah. Mike McCarthy loves tight ends, but Richard Rodgers' production comes from everybody else being covered and him just being forgotten about.
Yeah.
The reality of the situation is Devontae Adams is a stud and can be a stud if everybody is healthy. Mm-hmm. You saw that in the playoff game. He put those numbers up when everybody was healthy.
Yeah.
That's
after
what
the catch,
Lacy's healthy. James Starks is. Everybody's healthy. The fact of the matter is the Green Bay Packers offensive line just got better. It's just a year older. A lot of those guys, remember the Packers had line troubles 2 years ago.
Yeah, they did.
But the line is in top-notch form. Anybody who saw that championship game last year could tell you that for sure.
Limping
those
Aaron
playoff
Rodgers,
games, they played
yeah.
well. And you're looking at it right now. If one of those guys do get injured, it's number one receiver value. And it's all about production. If Aaron Rodgers, Luck, Brady Manning, if those guys throw 4,500 yards, 5,000 yards, somebody has to catch them. Mm-hmm. If Nelson gets 1,000 yards, Cobb gets 1,000 yards, I think Rodgers being in his prime, this could be the year with all those receivers being at that prime age. Nelson's not quite over the hump yet. Cobb is entering his prime, being a guy who can play in the slot. And then having Adams on the outside, you could see the 3 1,000-yard season, the Steve Breston, Anquan Bolden, Larry Fitzgerald, or if you're old for your old sake, the Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, Brandon Stokely year. I think you may be in for another one of those. I love the Packers this year as a team. They're just absolutely stacked. And Devontae Adams should be in your top 100, if not your top 80, around the 80 spot. He's that good for value right now. He could put up more points this year than a guy like Vincent Jackson. And Jackson, I think, is great value for where he's going.
Absolutely. I got to totally agree with you there, Nick. Moving on to another handcuff that I like. And we were talking pre-broadcast about Jonathan Stewart not being able to stay healthy. Why isn't anybody talking about Cameron Artis-Payne? I think he was drafted this past year, the year before. Okay, we haven't really seen a lot of him too much. I got to watch him a little bit I will be watching him in preseason this year. Could be a big name. And really the only thing for me here is that Ron Rivera likes to run the football. There is no D'Angelo Williams anymore. Okay, yes, you still got to worry about the big bowling ball, whose name's escaping me right now, getting those touchdowns. Mike Tolbert, thank you. But again, Jonathan Stewart has been unable to stay healthy in his entire career, basically. Now, yes, he was locked in a two-headed monster kind of situation, too, for a while. But even some of those years, D'Angelo Williams kind of had to shoulder the load at a certain point because this guy just can't stay healthy. So when I look at that and I look at the fact that I could probably get Cameron Artis-Payne, again, pre-camp, at the second or last round of my draft, knowing that how consistently Jonathan Stewart gets hurt. That's something I want to take advantage of, especially those running lanes will be there with Cam running the football. Okay, now there is a little bit inconsistency of their offensive line, but again, as a last round draft pick that could potentially turn out to be a starter, I like Cameron Artis-Payne as a sneaky deep handcuff.
Oh, man. Yeah, you're reading my mind here. Like, I love that pick. One, because the Panthers play in a not-so-good NFC South. The NFC South was bad last year. They didn't really take many strides to get a ton better. The team that may look the best will be Atlanta. The Saints got better on offensive line, but the Saints' defense is still horrid. When I look at it right now, the Panthers are in a situation where they could win games. Cam's in a contract year. This is where you pray Jonathan Stewart stays healthy in training camp, because a player like that will skyrocket up the draft boards. A la, if you remember the Giants, David Wilson went from a sixth-rounder to like a second-rounder. And while that didn't pan out, if Wilson had stayed healthy with that electrifying talent, could have been something special in New York. That's going back a reference a couple of years ago.
Shame.
But,
wish him the best.
I definitely do with his neck. But that's I totally agree with you, Tom. There's really good value there at running back. And like I said before, when it comes to handcuff, pick a handcuff that's going to help you win, or on a team that's going to win games. Those are usually the best bets for guys who end up producing. Even if they're not a top 20 guy the next year, for this upcoming year, if that team's going to play well, the fantasy is probably going to be there. And it's most obvious at the quarterback position. But at other positions, it does help to win games here and there. Part of it's opportunity, which is what winning teams will give you, besides volume. If you play on a losing team, the only way you're going to produce is with volume a lot of the time. That's the biggest thing. And that's what you're betting on Latavius Murray when you bet on guys like that this year, is volume. A guy in Carolina like that, if Jonathan Stewart's going to get hurt, not only could his talent level, we haven't seen it yet in the NFL, but not only is his talent level potential really good on a team that could win in the NFC South, but the volume could be there once Stewart gets hurt.
Definitely.
And that's what could really pay off. So, yeah, that's what I totally agree with you, Tom.
Definitely. Another guy that I like coming out here, now we know Adrian Peterson's basically like a Dr. Giroux android running around on the football field. But I like Jerick McKinnon, man, another guy that I got to consider holding just because I might get that value repaid in a year or two. But this guy had 27 receptions. He ran for 4.8 yards per carry. Okay, now he wasn't used inside the 20s, and that's where you'll have the value of Matt Asiata if an Adrian Peterson were to go down. But in a PPR between the 20s, I like the talent of Jerick McKinnon. What do you think about Jerick McKinnon, Nick?
I like Jerick McKinnon a lot, and any running back over the age of 30, I think, is a really good bet to potentially take a handcuff there. And he's over the age of 30. Now, AP is a robot. He is the exception to the rule. You know, we talked about earlier in the podcast, when you hit 32 years old, the only running backs to rush for over 1,000 yards, Emmitt Smith and Ricky Williams, since 2001. Realistically speaking, I think that Adrian Peterson will be that player when he's 32 years old. So, looking at it from that perspective, I like AP a lot, and that's going to hurt McKinnon. But here's the deal. If AP gets hurt for 1 or 2 games, it's Norv Turner. And Norv Turner does a couple of things really well. One of them is using that X receiver really well, whether it's Josh Gordon or Charles Johnson. Charles freaking Johnson.
We love him. We both love him this year.
But he also, Trent Richardson offense in Cleveland, the only offense that Trent Richardson worked in is the Norv Turner offense.
And that's how he produced 10 touchdowns, which is why everybody raved about him.
So, is Adrian Peterson at the age of 30 going to be producing 5 yards to carry? No. Is he going to produce 4.5 yards to carry? I will go out and say probably not. However, if he produces 4 yards to carry and gets you 12, 13 touchdowns this year, are you complaining?
No, absolutely not.
Cool.
I do definitely think he'll be in that 4 to 4.5. You're right. I don't know if his days of being a 5 yards per carry guy are there anymore. I know in his 2012 breakout season it was 6 yards per carry, and I definitely wouldn't be expecting something like that. But he has not failed us in the category of double-digit touchdowns, and you're right about that, so I'm not crying there. But,
point is with McKinnon, getting to McKinnon, is that there will be opportunity if AP suffers any injury whatsoever, and it will be a high-volume situation. Again, you pointed out Matt Asiata. Matt Asiata can produce in that offense. If Matt Asiata can produce in that offense, that should tell you something about McKinnon, who is a much better back.
Most definitely, Nick. Thank you. We're going to move on to some deep sleepers here that you could find at the bottom of your draft. Again, this is where we're looking to hit that home run without paying that value price to try to put our fantasy rosters over the top. Nick, give me a guy that you love this year that can help your fantasy team achieve success.
Man, well, we've talked about a guy like Charles Johnson so much. I'll just bring it up one more time. Charles Johnson in Minnesota. Teddy Bridgewater's coming into his second year. He's only going to get better. He's with Norv Turner. You talk about it right now. Charles Johnson's going to explode. He's the guy that everybody wanted Cordero Patterson to be.
Yeah, don't remind me.
And I'll tell you right now, Charles Johnson is value. You're going to be sitting there. You're going to be debating between guys potentially like Kevin White, and then Charles Johnson will be there too. Mm-hmm. But the guys like Amari Cooper, who are also, I think Amari Cooper's going to have a very good year, PPR specifically. I think Charles Johnson's he's a guy. The thing about Charles Johnson that scares me about not getting him is that you could see him go to a team, and not only will he produce with yards, but I think he's in a situation this year where Minnesota's offense is on the up with AP coming back. And that could lead to more touchdowns for a guy in those later rounds comparative to other guys like Vincent Jackson who are on worse offenses. With Mike Wallace being there, Charles Johnson isn't the only guy. If there's a receiver you want to own in Minnesota, it's by far Charles Johnson. He's a big home run hitter for me. That's the guy I'll go with first.
Totally agree with you there. I love Johnson's value. Teddy Bridgewater really had an affinity for him there at the end of the season. One of my sleepers is going to be Andre Williams. I'm a Giants fan. I'll throw it out there. But seriously, when I look at it objectively, right, and I look at Andre Williams, how he had the 3.3 yards per carry. Listen, I don't expect this guy to be a world beater like a Le'Veon Bell, even though Le'Veon Bell averaged 3.5 his rookie year. 18 receptions tells me that this guy, there's a prayer at least that he could potentially provide some catch value, okay? And Rashad Jennings, 30. And I'll just, again, you brought up the stat with the 30-year-olds and the 1,000-yard rushing season.
Specifically 32 in that aspect. But, yeah, it's downhill from there. It's
downhill from there. And Rashad Jennings had a ridiculously long injury list. Okay, now he could be value going where he is at 8 if he stays healthy. I'm not banking on it. I'd rather use a 13th, 14th round draft selection in a younger guy. He had 7 touchdowns in his last 10 games. I like that as value. I guess you might be able to put him in that handcuff variety, but if I'm looking at a sleeper and I desperately need running back, I'm looking at potentially Andre Williams, or even for that matter, Shane Vereen in a PPR.
Only if you're in PPR.
Only if you're in PPR, Vereen, absolutely. In a PPR, Shane Vereen finished as a top 20 back, so he retained RB2 value even though he was in a game plan dependent system. So we're kind of nearing the end here, Nick. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap this thing up?
Well, when we were talking about sleepers and home run hits, I want to go for if you're not first, you're last, and that's the approach I want people to remember at tight end this year.
Definitely,
if you ain't first.
You're last.
You're last.
Thanks, Ricky Bobby.
But that's what you want to be.
Yeah.
It really is if you think about it. Unless you're getting really good value on Travis Kelce, who, by the way, would you rather take Andre Johnson or Travis Kelce?
Andre Johnson.
Because those are where Travis Kelce's going.
Yeah.
You're going to have to really, really hit lucky. There's a couple of tight ends that are going to hit big this year, and you're going to have to really like that guy, whether you think Zach Ertz is going to explode or whether you think Travis Kelce is going to explode with Macklin being there. If you're not getting Gronk, Jimmy, let me point out to you, Jimmy Graham had under 1,000 yards receiving last year.
And I think that'll be the same. He might get double-digit touchdowns, but I don't think he's a 1,000-yard guy.
Do not, fair warning to everybody, never go chasing touchdown totals. They will not get you there. That's why I'm not taking Des Bryant in the first round for me personally. I like Julio Jones because I think the yardage is more consistent in Atlanta this upcoming year. And Des Bryant coming off 16 touchdowns, that's a guaranteed regression. And I think that's just something you have to look out. That's why I value a guy like Julio a little bit better than Des. It's not knock against Des. He's still a top 5 receiver in fantasy. It's just I don't think 16 touchdowns is reasonable to believe for somebody to get in an NFL season. Chasing touchdowns is dangerous. That's why for tight ends, guys like Kyle Rudolph, who went mid-round last year, were on free agency by week 4.
Yeah, he busted.
So when you're looking at it right now, if I could tell you in rounds 11 through 15, you can get a guy like Josh Hill, you can get a guy like Tyler Eifert.
That's tremendous value.
Those are picks of guys who could end up being top 5 this year. Mainly because, one, Eifert's a former first-round pick. The athleticism's there. You saw he had 3 catches in the first half before he dislocated his elbow in the Week 1 game. People forget about that. The Bengals are going to use Tyler Eifert this year. I'd be surprised if they didn't. They're going to have A.J. Green, but I guarantee that Eifert is probably the next best option next to tied with Sanu. If Eifert's healthy, he could put together a very nice season and very good value, a mid-level TE1. Don't go overdrafting a tight end. Guys like Josh Hill and Tyler Eifert, they're sitting at the end, are just waiting for you to pick them.
That's great insight, Nick, on tight ends, and great insight on value because that's how fantasy football is won. I want to thank everybody who listened to the episode. Nick, thank you so much for being on the show. I really loved having you here. Again, you can follow this guy on Twitter at Nicholas Lippa. As you can see from the bottom of the screen, you can follow me at Sports Debate Tom. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We've got the blog up. Check us out. Give us a rating. We'll be back for more fantasy content as training camp nears, so I hope everybody's getting ready, and we will see you next time here on Fantasy First.
High stakes sports debates.